Patriotic Party is topping the charts in the first campaign language monitoring project report of the Media Foundation for West Africa. The report, which is based on monitoring of 516 programs on 40 radio stations for the period of April 18 to April 30, 2016, names political parties whose officials, affiliates, and supporters used abusive language, individuals and radio presenters who used abusive language, and radio stations on which the indecent expressions were used. Here's a quick breakdown of the report. 87 incidents of indecent expressions were recorded on 18 out of 40 radio stations monitored. Officials, affiliates, and supporters of the NPP topped the list of culprits with a total of 27 incidents. The ruling NDC followed with a total of 16 incidents. Accra-based Muntie FM topped the list with 22 incidents, followed by Oman FM with 15 incidents, and Adom FM and Diamond FM with 7 each. Joining us now in the studio is the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleiman Abraham. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us this afternoon. So, for these incidents you've captured in your reports, what issues fueled these kind of indecent expressions that were heard on these radio stations?
Well, essentially, these were around conversations on the ongoing electoral campaigns, which is dominating the airwaves at this stage, and that is, I think, something that we should all expect. But from the report, if you go into the details, you would realize that the various categories of indecent expressions, such as unsubstantiated allegations, direct insults, comments calling for violence, comment calling for confrontation, and so on and so forth, were among the ones that dominate the conversations. And then, of course, this was a period when we were having the limited voter registration exercise. So accusations, counter-accusations, and so on and so forth were part of the issues that fueled the use of indecent expression by activists and sometimes radio station presenters.
Okay, now this is the first you're doing for this year's elections, but in the past you've done reports. Is this high for the first one you've done in an election year?
Well, I wouldn't say so, even though we would wish that there was none, you know. But given the tension around the elections and so on and so forth, well, one would say that this is quite expected. But as I said, we wish that it's never happening. And it's our hope that as we go along, what we've witnessed will begin to reduce. But I should also say that as we go along, the number of stations we'll be monitoring will be increasing. By July, we would increase it from the current 40 to 70. And so because of the increase in the number of radio stations, we may then see a trend where the individual incidents of report may go up, but as a reflection of how many radio stations are recording how many incidents, I think that it may not be as high as we are witnessing it.
Okay, now for the MPP topping the charts, who are the prominent individuals who are caught in this web of using indecent expressions?
Well, as the report indicated, we're looking at officials, supporters, affiliates of the respective parties, and again, the names are contained in the report, and I would wish that the media make references to them directly, because we are in a situation where, as an organization, people are looking at us not on the basis of the credibility of the organization and the work that we are doing, which involve the political parties, the media, and so on and so forth. You know, as usual, people may be looking at us from the lenses of whether these guys are MPP or these guys are NDC. And that is why, if you look at the heading, you have captured it as MPP topping the list. Of course, that is what the figures portray. But from us, we decided to say that we've just named political parties, activists, and radio stations who have been using abusive expressions on radio. And so you have references to them, and I would wish that the media
would make specific reference to those ones. Okay, but what were some of the lapses that saw more of these incidents happen? You say these were done on radio stations. Is it that there was poor moderating, or these were just cases where people will speak and there is no control?
Well, I think that essentially that would be the factor. In 2012, when we were doing the monitoring, from the beginning, we saw a similar trend. But as we went along and radio stations became aware, and then also told themselves, we don't want to be put out there as a station that, you know, allows or tolerates incidents of indecent expression. We saw a situation where moderators then became very firm, would demand that people who use bad language should retract and apologize. There were incidents where people had used certain offensive words. They were asked to retract and apologize. They insisted they wouldn't, and they were actually made to walk out of the studio. I suppose as we go along, that is what we will begin to see. But for these incidents, as the report again say, you would notice that a number of presenters themselves used words and comments that we thought were inappropriate. And therefore, you would then have a sense that if journalists and presenters themselves were involved in this, then to what extent would they be able to control people on their platforms who would use, indecent expression? But this being the first report, it serves as a reminder to people. I'm sure that people will become aware this thing is going on and will begin to see how they conduct themselves and their affairs very well.
Okay, but for these political parties you speak of, some say the stakes are high in this election, and so whether you name and shame or not, you will see more of these incidents.
Well, I agree the stakes could be high. It has always been high in every elections. There are particular indicators that people have looked at and say, well, it makes this particular elections more competitive, if I may put it that way. But again, I believe that Ghanaians are very much discerning. The factors they are looking at includes which political party or which political groups are interested in the peace of this country. And I'm sure that Ghanaians would to a large extent be looking at which party would give them the serene environment to operate. And I believe that if you're a party or a political group, and from these monitoring or from this monitoring, it becomes quite clear that you want to come to power through, acts of indecent expression and so on, it wouldn't be in your favor. And I'm quite comfortable, just as we witnessed in 2012, political parties would advise themselves. And in as much as we would see one party or the other topping from one report to the other, I am confident that we'll also begin to see political parties who would say, look, we don't endorse these kinds of comments and we condemn them when they happen. Of course, we have activists and supporters around the country that sometimes we cannot reach out to, but as a political party, we don't endorse these kinds of things. I believe that is what we'll begin to hear as we go along.
Okay, now one thing I always look out for in these reports are expressions that incite violence. Do we see more of that in this report?
Quite a number of such expressions, and I believe that even in 2012, in almost every report, there would have been some incident or some expression calling for violence and confrontation, as we specifically designated. And in this particular report, there are a few of those. I'm hoping that, again, as people become aware that this monitoring is going on and the naming and the publication of these reports publicly, political parties and activists and individuals, I believe that individuals have their reputation to protect. And that is why as an organization, we are very, very careful and very meticulous in coming up with this report, because we are dealing with the reputations of people. We are dealing with, political parties that are looking for power and, campaigning day in, day out. You cannot just indict them in any way without any basis. And I'm sure that people are mindful of their reputation and they are going to desist from acts that would get them into our books. Of course, we are also mindful of the fact that politics is politics. It has to be interesting. We cannot say that people should be docile on air and so on and so forth. But what we're saying is you can debate as hard as you want. You can put out the facts as much as you want. But we can do so without insulting each other. We can do so without, verbally abusing each other. We can do so without, using ethnocentric comments and religious comments that can drive all of us into trouble.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Bama, for joining us this afternoon on the program to give us details of the first report they've done on the campaign monitoring, especially with people making utterances in recent times in relation to politics and the 2016 elections.